Welcome to The Maintenance Mindset, an audio-video podcast brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Paul Rhodes, and over the more than 3 decades in the apartment industry, I've had roles that include being on-site, providing services as a vendor, creating and delivering multiple education programs, and active association work. This podcast is centered on the often overlooked role that our on-site maintenance workers play. You know, the men and women that respond in the middle of the night to the toilet call, or the after hours, it's really hot in my apartment request, or my favorite, my ring fell down the drain, get over here now. In other words, the often unsung heroes who are responsible for asset preservation and resident satisfaction. Working in multifamily maintenance provides interesting, sometimes amusing, and often fascinating stories and viewpoints. My encouragement to you is this: whatever you do it with a maintenance mindset. If your inbox or your social medias are anything like mine, chances are you've gotten a bunch of lists. 5 ways to start the new year, 3 big things that we need to do, 1,200 ways to skin a cat. I don't know what it is, but I've got a lot of those same lists in my inbox and even a couple in my mailbox that have shown up. But there's one that really caught my attention. And it's a study that came out from Gartner Incorporated. And it looks at the top 5 priorities for human resource leaders in 2025. And what caught my attention is one of them had some data and statistics that really, I believe, is one of the things that'll drive us, particularly in the maintenance field, for the apartment industry this year. Now, before we get into the specific one, I do want to give you their top 5 priorities for HR leaders this year. And they are leader and manager development, organizational culture, strategic and workforce planning, change management, and human resource technology. Now, 4 of those things, I think, some of our management companies and some of our properties will have to deal with them. But one of them, I think, is being underrepresented in discussions and decision-making, particularly at the site level and everything that's affecting the site level. Now, the one that sticks out to me is change management. And that is a very loaded term. I've been able to be the fly on the wall for some large brainstorming sessions of different management companies. And the number of times that leaders are mentioning change management in terms to initiatives that they either started, are in the middle of, or are completing is infinite. There's a lot of change management going on, and I think this is a problem. It's a big problem, and the great thing is Gartner gave some statistics to back up what they were saying and seeing. Now, just for some context, this is a study of 1,400 human resource leaders in 60 countries around the world from all different industries. So, of course, I'm looking at it from the perspective of an on-site maintenance person, or maybe even our regional teams. But even though this study doesn't specifically address those viewpoints, I think it's very, very indicative of maybe some of the reasons we're having high turnover rates, why we're having a hard time being attractive to people coming into the industry, even a little bit more so in studies, what I'm seeing about the skilled trades. Now, what Gartner says is that 74% of human resource leaders say that managers are not equipped to lead change. Let me say that again. 3/4 of human resource leaders say that their managers are not equipped to lead change. That's horrifying. Not only that, they say that 73% of human resource leaders agree that employees are fatigued from all of the change. Again, almost 3/4 of our employees are fatigued from change. And they go on to talk about something that, again, I believe affects our on-site workers, not even from the maintenance side, but even just our office team side a lot. And that is the fact that fatigue is equivalent to lower engagement. That was probably a big word for 2024. I have a feeling it'll be again for this year. But fatigue also decreases longevity, results in a higher turnover, and carries less psychological safety for workers on our teams. Now, all of these things to me ring true with what I'm hearing from other industries, but also with a lot of maintenance directors and maintenance leaders of all size management companies. When I'm talking to people in conferences and out on the towns, out on the town, there's a lot of stress going on and a lot of concern about this area. So I wanted to kind of address this and maybe give us a different way of looking. As a matter of fact, I would like to look at change management through two different frames of view, two different perspectives that maybe we haven't thought of. Now, one thing to realize is that I am not a trained change management person. I don't have a belt in Six Sigma or am a part of an agile scrum and I haven't read a whole book. I've read a chapter here and there and listened to some podcasts on change management. And I definitely have led some change management, some more successful than others. But I'm coming at this from a maintenance mindset. And I begin by looking at something that I found called Kurzweil's Law. Now, Kurzweil's Law says that when a technology approaches a barrier, a new technology will be invented to allow us to cross that barrier. Now, the reason why Kurzweil's Law is applicable for us is the fact that we, maintenance workers, have a very specific barrier that we're dealing with on our communities. And that barrier is the asset itself. By that, I mean that, our building was built. It was made. And I don't care if it's a garden style, mid-rise, high-rise apartment. I don't care if it's way, way out in the middle of nowhere in the country or smack dab downtown in a multi-million person population. The building exists. It's there. And yet, population, decisions, politics, traffic patterns, growth, or reduction. All of these things are changing. And if we looked at a building or our property as the technology that's mentioned in Kurzweil's Law, it becomes a barrier to change because the building exists. Now, the running joke in maintenance circles is, well, if there's a problem with the building, we could always burn it down and start all over. That's a joke. That is just a throwaway statement. That's not a indicative. And please don't make me have to get the lawyers and say, full disclosure, don't burn your building down. But we do have to honor the fact that there is a lot of change. There's a lot of turbulence. One of my favorite words here recently has been churn going on in personnel. We've even mentioned some of it already this particular show. But you know what? Our building doesn't change. We're maintenance. We maintain things. We're not going out developing and building new things. We have what we have. And yet, I agree with those stats that Gartner said, that 3/4 of our managers, and by managers, that doesn't just mean property managers, that means our on-site maintenance managers. I'm familiar with calling them maintenance supervisors, but whatever the title is, they are managers as well. This, I think, even goes up to include our regional teams, the regional maintenance directors or regional engineers or regional area. Again, whatever that title is, we're not really equipped to deal with change management. Now, we create change all the time. I mean, heck, there are times when even as a instructor, if I go and walk through a property, I remember when I was working for the National Apartment Association, I'd go show up somewhere to do a class, and I'd walk into the office, and it was fascinating to me just by the change in the energy of a room when somebody realized, oh, that's the NAA guy. I've seen him on video. Ooh. And it's almost like everybody stood up a little bit straighter and fixed something and real quick, look, if I'm drinking coffee and I laugh, it comes out my nose just like anybody and everybody else. I mean, I'm nothing special. But when our regional leaders or our corporate leaders show up on site, that's a change. Are we managing those correctly? And if so, how are we doing it? What exactly are we doing to make that? I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the apartment industry has a problem. Specifically maintenance, we do have a problem. There's a lot of change going on. A change in perspective, a change in focus, a change in emphasis on some things. This month, our focus is on occupancy. We need our occupancy to go up. So that means we're going to drop our rents. And I'm oversimplifying this. I realize it. But you know what? If you drop rent, your occupancy has a way of going up. And then all of a sudden, we begin to look at the economics. Oh no, our economic occupancy is going down. We need that to go up, so we need to raise rents. Well, what happens to occupancy then? Occupancy has a tendency to go down. That means we need to do specials. We need to run deals, 1 month free, whatever all of those things are. And there's a lot that go into making those decisions, which is great. We need to do those things. But it seems like our on-site teams are getting lost in the shuffle. According to the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University, the median age for rental stock in 2022 was 44 years old. Yes. We had in 2023, I believe it was, we had record development, record delivery on new buildings, new rental buildings. But if the year before that, our median age on our building, on our product, is 44 years old, if our only answers are to throw new computer digital technology at those aging buildings, we have a problem. In other words, is the change that we are proposing on a regular basis directed towards and becoming a solution for the problems that we have. Because really, at the end of the day, change always happens. It is always occurring. My continuing statement of entropy is job security. That is an acknowledgement that changing happens all the time. Our buildings do get older. And in the same way that every day I move around and some muscle or joint cracks a little bit differently, and sometimes I have aches and pains in different places that I didn't have aches and pains yesterday, I now recognize that my building is the same way. Every day that building ages. And our buildings, median age, they're midlife. So what I want to do is to look at it, change from two different perspectives. And being a maintenance technician, my two different views, my frames, if you will, for change is this. This change, whatever the change is that is being discussed, that we're looking at, is this an app or is it an appliance? You see, if we say that a change is an appliance, that's a different thing than an app that is found, on our phone. And let me explain this. If we're talking about a change in the form of an app, I tend to think of that the same way that I look at these programs or applications that are on my phone. In other words, quite frequently, they're released before they're finished. Before he passed away, my dad and I had a fantastic discussion talking about the changes to the way things are done today versus when he was younger. My dad was born in 1932, and his primary job when he entered into the career force or into the workforce was auto mechanics. That was how he got his first job. His father ran a car dealership, and he was a parts washer. He grabbed parts, he was the gopher, and then he'd take whatever bearing or transmission or hub or gear or whatever it was that the mechanics in the dealer shop were working on, he would take them over to his station and wash them. Degreaser and cleaner and lube them and reload bearings and greases and things like that. But whenever a new model car was delivered to the dealership, the car manufacturer would send a representative out that would teach those mechanics everything there was to know about that car. And once the car got to the dealer, those mechanics would have to perform finishing adjustments. But once they finished those adjustments, that's it. The car was then sold to the customer, and the car didn't change unless the customer added modifications to it. But by and large, you bought a 57 Chevy, that's what you had, was a 57 Chevy. As it got older, the car didn't automatically change. It was there. In my dad's view, that was the way things were done. In other words, you released a product when it was 100% what it was and what it would be. If somebody wanted to adjust it, they had to fundamentally change whatever that thing was. Now, in the new world, the world of applications, we actually have to have on our phone a routine that connects the phone. I'm on an Android. It has to connect to the Play Store, or of course, if you have an Apple phone, it has to connect to the Apple Store on a regular basis. And what does it download? Updates. And how many times of those updates do you get it and it changes the app in a fundamental way? You know, that's one of the changes that our properties are dealing with. If you have a property management system that your on-site team has been used to using, and then all of a sudden they update it, I'm sure for a very good reason, but suddenly the button that my maintenance technician used to go up here to press to do whatever function it was on his phone, now he has to go down here. But when he presses it down there, now it pops up a different menu that gives him options that he has to pick from in a different way. And he has to interact in a very fundamental way with that device. You see, my dad's complaint was, now the perception is that we're dealing in a world of applications, of apps, meaning that a product is developed and it's gotten to a good place, but not the finished place. It's gotten to a good point and then released out into the public because you got to move fast. You got to keep going. And then the public, the customer, the end user is reliant upon the owner of the application to use the customer as experimentation on how well that application is working. And then the owner, the manufacturer, has to download updates on a regular basis to the app, to the application. The user, by and large, just is required to take it. Because if they don't take that application, that update, then you're out of date, you're out of security protocols and all of the other programs that use that. You see, the reason why I use an appliance and an application as the difference is that really an application is top-down change, meaning you have a thing, whatever is situation normal, and from the top, change occurs. It is forced, it is driven, it is drilled down that the user has to accept and adapt. That's a different thing than an appliance. You know, an appliance, a dishwasher. A dishwasher, when it's released and sold in the store, and then it's installed into one of our apartments, it's still a dishwasher. The dishwasher doesn't have to be upgraded or attached to a Wi-Fi network, or there's not a systematic programming that has to go on. Once it's embedded, the dishwasher is a dishwasher. That's why they can still print instruction manuals on paper for appliances, because those instructions don't change after it's been manufactured, after it's been made. Those paper instructions that, you know, in our vacant apartments, when we replace all the appliances like we do on a renovation, every one of those instructions gets shoved into a drawer where the maintenance guys and gals say, the resident will read those. Right. When the resident moves out, guess where all those instructions are? They're either still in the drawer, or you'll find them on top of all the cabinets where the resident got frustrated because they wanted to use that drawer for something, and they just threw them all up on top of the cabinets. But fundamentally, the dishwasher doesn't change. The stove doesn't change. The refrigerator does not change. It is what it is. Now, you see, that's an appliance. And by and large, if any change happens around the appliance, the change doesn't come from on high or up top. Any change comes from down up, meaning our user of the appliance, our resident, our maintenance team, they have to begin making adjustments to that appliance. They make the repairs to that appliance to keep it running when fighting entropy as it ages or as it gets old. GE, Whirlpool, Electrolux, whatever the manufacturer was, they don't get in touch with that appliance to change it at all. I know, this might be oversimplification because it's also a difference between hardware and software, and I recognize that. But on our properties, it seems like if we're going to be ready to discuss change and ready to lead our teams in change, we need to have an understanding about that. So, okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about changes in both of those frames, from the frame of an application and the frame of an appliance. Be right back.
Hey there. I'm Paul Rhodes from the Maintenance Mindset podcast, and today I have something a little bit different for you, and that is a little bit of personal philosophy. See, I live life by 3 rules. 2 of those rules are emblazoned on my dining room wall. My wife made a quilted wall hanging that have 2 of those rules on them because the 3rd rule is enforced all the time. The first 2 might be optional. You see, it's the 3 rules of coffee. Rule number 1 says, life is too short for bad coffee. Rule number 2, bad coffee is better than no coffee. Because of rule number 3, which is always in force, no coffee, no worky. I believe in coffee. Matter of fact, I just about always have a cup nearby that is full of that wonderful, velvety, fantastic elixir of life. The reason why I'm talking to you about this today is we now have the multifamily media network Grounds for Connection coffee. And if you haven't tried this yet, I can tell you from experience, it is definitely rule number 1 coffee. This stuff is fantastic. It's a mixture of beans from Central America, South America, and Indonesia. It definitely has a chocolatey note to it that is the fantastic way I use to stay caffeinated. And it's not rule 2 coffee, because remember rule 3, no coffee, no worky. So if you're a late night maintenance team member who has to be up either early or way later than what you want, the next day, do yourself a favor. Get yourself a bag of Grounds for Connection from the Multifamily Media Network website. Thank you for your attention and have a caffeinated day.
All right, so if we're discussing change, looking at it from 2 points of reference, both an appliance and an application. Let's take that application first, because that's the one that our on-site team actually has the lowest amount of control over. Our on-site teams, and I would say in general terms, the larger the management company or the larger the organization, the less control our on-site teams have. The lower on the totem pole, the less decision-making ability. So what that means is that for our on-site team, if we're dealing with a change that is similar to an application, our on-site team is dealing with somebody else's timeline. In other words, hey, maintenance team, we have this new initiative that we need to do. We need you to do it on this timeline or make it complete by this date. There is a little bit of flexibility once you know that, but that end date is determined by somebody above or at a higher, more senior level than our on-site team. It's also a case that when we're dealing with an application, that change ends up being dictated by the connection and access that our on-site teams have to the place that the change is coming from. When I'm asked, and when I did roll out a service management platform, a company that provided an application that we used that integrated with our property management system back when I was with the previous management company, we rolled it out, and it was an independent application from the property management provider. And it was an interesting process to go through because the data that we wanted, the end result that we wanted, lived in our property management provider. And really, this application just became a skin on top of that data that provided an interface for our on-site teams to use and work with. And that interface was made specifically for our maintenance teams to work with. And it worked fine. It was great. The challenge became that the application was very responsive to what we wanted as a business case, less responsive to what our on-site teams wanted as a need. But the corporate world, of course, my view is the corporate world wrote the check. So of course they're going to be very responsive to the corporate world. If the corporate world wanted something, it happened. The application changed, but very, very rarely was any of those changes dictated by our on-site teams. So that left our on-site teams kind of under the thumb of whatever the application needed. Not only that, one of the most common issues that we had was that connectivity piece, was that logging in piece, was that for myriad of good reasons, every day our maintenance team members had to log back into their phone. And not only that, depending on what settings on their phones were, in some cases how old their phones were, they had to log back into their phones multiple times in order to use it on a daily basis. That's a challenge from the on-site level. Now, the good thing about that is that you do end up having a very standardized reporting system, which is great for our corporate world, but on site, we had a real hard time of getting that information out to how useful those reports are for on-site decisions. And while, yes, they were there, it was very challenging on multiple properties to get the same information out about the application, because by the time we would roll through and gain a proficiency in how that application was working, the application would be changed again. And quite frequently, we ended up dealing with change fatigue, meaning I would have maintenance technicians that would come to me and say, look, Paul, this thing has changed again. It's not doing what it did yesterday. And I just got used to what it was doing yesterday based on the change that happened a month ago. So wait, you're telling me now that I have to change the way I work with and interact with this thing today? Why should I, if what I'm going to learn and how I'm going to use it today is just going to change 2 weeks from now. Why? That's an example of that fatigue, that frustration that 3/4 of workers are seeing based on that Gartner study. Now, when we're dealing with an appliance, that's a little bit more bottom up, meaning that once our workers, our on-site workers, are trained in how to use the thing, whatever it is, it doesn't fundamentally change. We may need to refine how they work with the thing, but it doesn't fundamentally change. What that means is for our workers, the thing is the thing. We can focus on one item, one thing. And when we're dealing with situations, that's what leads to that psychological safety that we mentioned earlier. Because if I'm going in and I get a work order to work on a stove, for instance, or a faucet or a garbage disposal or an air conditioner, the air conditioner is the air conditioner. Overnight, it's not going to get a download from somewhere and suddenly the connections on the compressor, those 3 terminals, are now going to be 5 terminals that I'm going to have to interact with. Or the one terminal that used to be the common, well, that's now the start terminal or the run terminal, even though yesterday when I looked at it, it was the run or the start of the common, whatever it used to be. The air conditioner is the air conditioner. It's going to be that the whole way. I will always need a 5/16 nut driver in order to open up the top cowling of an air conditioning condensing unit. Those screws are not going to change overnight and make it to where I need a 1/4 inch. That's the benefit of an appliance perspective. The only problem is appliances are much more susceptible to entropy. They don't evolve in the same way that an application does. And how does an application evolve? By regular updates, by those changes. And my dad, when he talks about things the way they are today, before he passed away, when he talked about the things and vented the frustration, he did end up acknowledging that it's actually really neat to have products that end up with a longer use life because they continually change. Even the same physical thing, it changes. It gets an upgrade. So, okay. Where does this leave us? Well, the application of this particular topic is this. If we're dealing with a change at our communities, pause for just a minute and think about it. Is this change an application or is this change an appliance? An appliance is what it is. The physical thing is there, but maybe we're changing out a whole new physical thing. In other words, we took out the old burner stove that had the eyes on it, and we're replacing it with a glass top stove. It's still a stove. It still does what it does, but you know what? That fundamental thing has changed. It's the new model. As a worker, I have relatively this much change to do. And for those of you listening, I'm holding my fingers apart, finger and thumb apart, about an inch. If this change is an application change, then I'm going to respond differently because we're going to do a new thing. Oh, and by the way, when I set you up on how to do this new thing, I want to teach you all the features, but I also want to make you aware that some of those features may change. They may update. You may get new features, new functions, features that you were used to using may end up going away. That's 2 different methods of educating our on-site team members. And it's two different messages that we need to be sure that we're sending to them. One byproduct of an application change is exactly what happened with us on that app that was a third party to our property management system. That app continued to evolve and change to where roughly 8 months after we rolled it out, there were some really new whiz-bang, neat, awesome features that weren't even thought of when we rolled it out 8 months prior. But the problem is one of the mistakes we found out, we never came up with a method to keep our on-site teams abreast of what those changes were in an organized fashion. Meaning, 8 months later, our corporate team and our educational team and our reporting team, they were looking for all of this data that app, because of its updates, because of its evolution, it had the capability of providing, and yet our on-site team had change fatigue. They weren't even looking for the newest, latest, greatest whiz-bang feature because they just wanted to do the bare minimum in order to use, in their words, what this infernal thing keeps doing and being frustrated. By the way, one other change to be aware of that we need to take into consideration when we're looking at change through these two frames is how we deal with upgrading. Upgrading an appliance, normally that's easy. Take out one part, put another part in. Upgrading an app, upgrading an application, quite frequently you end up with a shortcut, meaning a workaround. For several reasons, our communities look at it this way. My boss said I have to use this thing. Therefore, I'm going to use this thing. But you know what? Getting used to using this thing, I'm going to use it what is best for me. And it's possible that what is best for me, the on-site team, is different than what is best for reporting, for data collection, and for going. Therefore, we need to be sure that we're aware that shortcuts and bypassing process and procedures will happen. And the greater the evolution occurs, the farther that change will happen from the original intention. So you see, change in my mind can be viewed as two things, either an application or an appliance. The application is top down, the appliance is bottom up. The application is more software based, the appliance is more hardware based. According to Gartner, 3/4 of our leaders aren't ready to lead change. So my question to you is, in 2025, when you're dealing with change, which kind of change is it? Thank you for joining me today on The Maintenance Mindset. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you somewhere.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Maintenance Mindset. I hope you take away ideas that apply to your current and future career goals. Please check out Maintenance Mindset Minute to hear short-form, high-impact, applicable, maintenance-centered information. Whatever you do today, do it with a maintenance mindset. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other industry podcasts, thought pieces, and sponsorship opportunities. I'll see you somewhere.